Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Andrew Roman Show. I'm so glad you tuned in. So to start us off today, I got a very simple question. It's not an easy one, but it's very simple. What's your favorite hobby? My favorite hobby, I got a lot, so I got to kind of break it down. But one, I love music. I love playing music. I play a little bit of guitar, a lot of instruments, but I love piano, electric guitar or something, get to jam a little bit. That's one of my hobbies. And actually, I play music more than I listen to music, but I like it. I know a lot of friends who are experts in listening to music. I mean, they play less than I do, but they know way more music than I do. I don't know if you're the same way. But another hobby, I love learning languages. I'm actually from Mexico. If you're just listening to my voice, I don't know if you can tell if I have too much of an accent. I don't know if you can tell if I got an accent or not, but I'm actually from Mexico, bro. No te creas. No, la verdad, soy de México. Nací, crecí en Guadalajara, tapatío de corazón. If you didn't understand the word I said, haha, I am Mexican, you see? No, I'm just kidding. So I was actually born and raised in Mexico, and I just say that to say that I speak Spanish and I love languages. But one of my more recent hobbies in the last couple of years has actually been reading. And this is important to what we're talking about today because, one, doesn't reading just make you feel like an old person? Honestly, I feel like the only people who just sit down, they could do anything else, but they just sit down in the middle of the afternoon after work, sit down, open up a book. I feel like a retired old person. I feel like I've made it in life, when I can have that downtime. Anyways, that might just be me. But I was not the kid to like reading whatsoever. But I actually just read a recent book. My dad got me in the habit, and I read this recent book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Holy cow. If cows were holy, this is it. Now, this is an incredible, incredible book which talks about many truths. I mean, as you can tell by the title, Man's Search for Meaning. And what this talks about, it's divided into two parts. It's the story of Viktor E. Frankl, who is a psychiatrist. He's passed away now, 1997, I believe. And but it's his story in the concentration camp. So he's raised in a Jewish family. During the Holocaust, he got taken to Auschwitz. If you don't know that, it was a death camp with gas chambers and everything. And so first half of the book is a little bit about his experience in the death camp. In the second half of the book, since he's a psychiatrist, he came up with a method, if you will, that's called logotherapy. So he did a lot of therapy. There's a lot of versions of therapy. If there's Freud that said, our search is mostly for pleasure, then there's our search for power or search for economic prosperity or something. And he came up with his own called Logos Therapy, which basically is the search for meaning. And that's what man's ultimately searching for. So today, I wanted to talk about the first part of the book because I think it's enriched me a lot since I've read it. I've thought about it a lot, and that is the question of. He looks at two questions. One is he looks at, he doesn't really just talk about all the horrible things that happened in the Holocaust, but the question is, why would anyone just come out alive out of such an atrocity that was done, the mental abuse, psychologically, physically, emotionally, all the abuse that they went through, especially including him. Again, he lived this thing. He's not just talking about it like us who never lived it, but he lived this thing. And he's asking, why would anyone actually survive that? How come they would come out of that? Is it possible? Does man have the ability to pull himself up despite his surroundings, despite his suffering and everything? So he looks at those questions. And I read this not too recently, and this was written more in the 1900s, I think 1950s or 1940s. It was written, and those questions of does man have the ability? So I'll make it personal. Do you and I have the ability to lift ourselves up from our surroundings and from our circumstances? Right now, we're living in a culture that says the opposite. Society is telling us that we're just merely a product of our environment, our product of our surroundings and our biology. What ends up happening is that since we're a product of our environment and our surroundings, then we really have no control of what becomes of our lives or what situation we're in right now. We really didn't decide that. It was just random abstract circumstances, especially when we're dealing with consequences, right? Consequences of the choices that we've made. We're told that's not really our fault. It's just other people's fault of where I am in life, or some abstract system of oppression or something like that. And I'll go a little bit more into that to talk about it. And what happens then is that personal responsibility goes out the window. You see, when we believe that we're all that we are right now is just a product or a result of our environment and how we grew up in our biology, then personal responsibility goes out the window when we're able just to follow in a group identity. I'm going to explain that. A group identity that turns the consequences of our decisions into grievances caused by someone else. Okay, let me explain. So in his book, Viktor Frankl shares his just horrible situations that he was in his testimony of how he lived through the Holocaust. Again, several years in concentration camps in Auschwitz. He's the one, if you didn't know this, do your research about Holocaust. It was horrible, and it's important to know it so it's not repeated, right? There's a famous quote that says, those who do not know history are more likely to repeat it. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's so true. And Viktor Frankl shares how he was coming out of the train carts that they were bringing all these Jewish people, and it was coming into Auschwitz. And as they would come down, they would line them up and they would just point right, left, right, left. No one knew what that meant at that moment. But what he figured out is they pointed him towards the right area. He called it luck, which it might have been luck, or I don't know what it was. But if he would have been told to go to the other side, I believe it was left. It was straight to the gas chambers and to the crematorium. Just like that, left, right. And he talks about just the physical abuse. He talks about the mental abuse. And you would think, one of the examples, this shocked me, how I kind of just thought that they were just sitting in a hut and it was just torture, and which is horrible. But there was actually so much labor, hard labor, that they had to do in horrible environments. So one of the times they had to work outside by clearing, it was an ice railroad track that they had to clear all the ice in the middle of a snowstorm. In the middle of a snowstorm, below, I think it might have been below 0 degrees. They have barely any clothes. A lot of them, their feet are so swollen that they can't even wear their shoes. So they're barefoot in the snow below negative degrees, and it's a snowstorm, and they got to keep working. That's horrible. You see, and what he observes in those moments, though, is that if man were only a result of his surroundings in the positions that he was in, then how could anyone ever make it out of that situation? How could anyone ever make it with his or her spirit still intact and with a good attitude, per se? You see, in the middle of all that suffering, he saw that a lot of men, a lot of prisoners were able to keep their dignity. They were able to keep their humanity. But how can one do that if they're a direct result of their surroundings and their biology? At the end of the day, if you're in such a horrible pain the whole time and you're abused, you lose your dignity. You lose your humanity. You become something else. You're purely reactive. You're not really active. You're purely reactive. But what he saw is that there were people who kept their dignity. And it was in the middle of that context, in the middle of the context of suffering and in the real oppression. This is what he writes in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He writes this: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance, to choose one's own way. I'm going to read that again. If you weren't listening, pay attention. If everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. How powerful is that? this is coming from a man who lived the Holocaust, who had every excuse to be shaped by his troubled circumstances, to be shaped by all that abuse and oppression. But instead, he says, there's one thing that cannot be taken away, and that is how we react. That is our attitude and how we can choose one's own way. You see, the risk of ownership, because this is what it is taking, I'll just say it this way. It's your life, it's your responsibility. See, a lot of times there's kind of, if you go to the abortion topic, there's my body, my choice, right? Or then there's the pro-life first. Well, in this case, it's your life in your choices, but it's your life in your responsibility. It's my life in my responsibility. I cannot put the responsibility of my actions on someone else, because this is what happens. You see, what happens is whenever we believe in just a group identity, that we're merely part of a group, that we're not really individuals. If I'm white, I'm just a white person. If you're black, you're just a black person, or whatever your skin color may be, or you're just a rich person or a poor person. It takes everything that's personal and defines personhood out of you. It takes it all away. That means that any mistakes, it's not your mistakes, right? It's just caused by someone else. So if I went to prison for some reason and I'm Latino and I can blame it on I'm Latino, so they were racist on me. Regardless if maybe I did something wrong to go to prison. Or it could be the other way around. Maybe I worked really hard for a certain position, but because I'm white, it's not because I worked hard, it's because I'm white. You see the problem? When we start seeing each other as just mere groups and just whatever our skin color is, whatever our upbringing is, but not our personal decisions, it takes away two things. So there is a risk in taking ownership of our lives, but it takes away not only the mistakes that we can learn from and take ownership of, but it also takes away the rewards. Sure, like you don't have to take personal ownership of your mistakes, but at the same time, you can't even be proud of, not in a haughty way, but you can't even be proud of the achievements you've made. Because now any achievement I've made in that sense is just because I'm white. Or any achievement a white person is just because they're white. Any achievement of a black person is just because of this. Any achievement of a rich person is because they grew up in a wealthy neighborhood. Or whatever the case. I'm not saying that our surroundings don't influence us. Of course they do. Of course they do. But ultimately, you and I have a choice. And that choice is powerful in the responsibility that we have. You see, as individuals, I really hope that you're getting this. You are an individual with such potential that needs to be actualized. You see, there's the difference. You have so much potential, so many opportunities, but they need to be actualized. You see, God has given us the power to choose, but not to change the consequences of our choice. We can't confuse that. A lot of people are like, okay, my life, I can choose whatever I want. You're sure, I guess, right? It's your responsibility, but you can't choose the consequences that will come along your choice. You have the freedom of your choice, just not the freedom to change the consequences. But look, how amazing is it? How amazing is it that you actually have a say of who you're going to become? You actually have a say of who you will be tomorrow, in the next day, in the next 10 years. Other people don't have to define that. You actually have a say to do it. You have the will and the power to make a change. Because if everything that's wrong in your life is someone else's fault, then it's someone else's responsibility to fix it. And you have no power. You're powerless. But if it's not all their fault, and some of it is your own fault, that's actually good news. Because that means you have the power, and you have the authority, if you will, and you can take the initiative to actually solve things. Because if it just belongs to someone else, then there's no sense. Let me explain it this way, okay? It's just simple. If you're not responsible for your actions, right, and you're not responsible for the things that you do, then for all the bad things, you cannot improve, because at the same time, you didn't make the mistake. Or whatever you want to say it, however you want to say it, there is actually a blessing of being responsible of your choices, because you can learn from your mistakes and then you can get better, and you have the power to get better. You see, here in America, as opposed to many places on earth, not everywhere else, but many places, we call it the land of opportunities. Check this out. Because it's not necessarily the land of actualized possibilities. It's the land of opportunity and possibilities, right? There's still a responsibility to you and I to actualize those opportunities into reality. Whoa. Okay, that went like so up in the clouds or something. Okay, let's just make this very simple. There's so many opportunities given to us in this country and in life in general. God gives us so many opportunities to make us better, and not just to have a better job or a better education, but for things that matter, to choose to love, to choose to forgive, to choose to invest more time. We can't blame that on other people. It's ultimately our choice. And in all that, we have to understand this is what I hope is so clear, and I got this from this book, is that at the end of the day, I can't really blame someone for where I am in life. Ultimately, I understand maybe you've had really harsh things happen to you, and I'm honestly and sincerely very sorry about that. I don't know how that feels. I've had hard things happen in my family, and not all of our families are the same. But what good news is it that you can actually change to the better? What good news is that? It's amazing. It's amazing news that you can actually be better tomorrow than you were today or than you were yesterday. You don't have to rely on someone else to make that decision for you. You can actually make that decision. See, we don't want to take the human out of humanity and just make us all one big group. Yes, we're united in humanity, but we're all extremely unique. And at the end of the day, you are a person. You're a person with decisions. You're a person with responsibility. And what great blessing is that? I wanted to leave you with this episode with that encouragement that whatever's going on in your life right now, there is power to change that. Now, we don't have all power. We're very limited in what we can actually change. Let's see if I got this quote. Yeah, this is from Viktor Frankl. He said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." And that's so true. Look, I've noticed that when I'm powerless to change circumstances. I mean, Viktor Frankl was powerless to get out of the Holocaust camps. He was powerless, but he was challenged to apply what he's learned into his own life. So I challenge you, no matter what circumstance you're in, no matter what's going on in your surroundings, I challenge you to take ownership. Take that responsibility. Take the responsibility to actually make a better you. Make a better you, boo. No, but I'm totally serious about that. And I'm really excited because this is not the last episode that we're going to talk about this book. I want to talk about the second half, and that's going to be in the coming episode, so you don't want to miss it. Apply this in your life today. Take responsibility. Take ownership. We'll see you next time.